J.D. Vance. But in the House, Democrats are projected to regain control by a modest 15 seats, which surely would shake up Congress over the next 2 years. For more, I want to bring in political analyst and the builder movement partner, Stephen Olikara. Stephen, thank you for being here. I mean, with Democrats appearing to gain some momentum, especially Democratic progressives, how does the party take advantage of actually securing victory, at least in the House, in November?
Democrats are gaining on the generic ballot, and that's partly because of Trump's approval rating being down, prices are up, and this unpopular Iran war continues to drag on. And that's why you're seeing this prediction from DDHQ showing the Democrats with a slight majority in the House and really 50-50 split in the U.S. Senate. And that's when I think you look at the U.S. Senate, and that's where these races get interesting. And the dynamic, the way I would describe it, is Democrats are snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, because you have races like in Maine, where you had so much momentum between Graham Plattner, and now you have this replacement in Troy Jackson. We'll see what happens with that race. Similarly, in a number of other statewide races, you're seeing Democrats put up candidates that might be too progressive for the general election electorate. This is important for people to realize. The primary electorate is about half to a third of the size of the general election electorate. Primary election voters tend to be more partisan, whiter, more higher income. The general election is more these exhausted majority voters, as I like to call them. And so you need to keep an eye to the general, and Democrats might be putting up candidates that are good for the primary, but bad for the general.
Speaking of that exhausted voter base, as you put it there a moment ago, on the flip side, how do Republicans quell voter concerns about things like affordability, the conflict in Iran, and maintain control of the Senate, which at the moment appears to be more significantly attainable?
I think for Republicans, the structure of the race is largely built in terms of the approval ratings, the prices. Like, a lot of that's not going to change, and we don't see any end in sight for the Iran war. And so what they really have to do is focus on these individual statewide candidates and their unique attributes. So, for example, Donald Trump going to Michigan, you've got an interesting Senate race there. Mike Rogers on the Republican side is actually a strong recruit. And then on the Democratic side, you don't know if it's going to the moderate Haley Stevens or the more progressive Democratic socialist Abdul al-Sayed. And so that's an example where focusing on those individual candidates might actually give you an edge in the general election.
Yeah, well, let's hone in on some of these races, key swing states. Let's first go to Maine, right, where you have progressive Troy Jackson just secure the Democratic nomination to oppose a longtime incumbent, Republican Senator Susan Collins, in November. What would another win for a progressive candidate mean for the party, as popularity for this group, as I mentioned a moment ago, just continues to grow, and it does seem like it is gaining further momentum?
This is a bellwether state because, first of all, this is a must-win for Democrats. This is the one Senate seat that has an incumbent Republican that Kamala Harris won in the last presidential election. But it's even bigger than that, as you point out. This is a progressive candidate who actually isn't as associated with the Democratic Socialist as some of these other candidates around the country. But if he wins, it does send a message. I mean, his goal basically is to capture the magic and the movement of Graham Plattner's economic populism without having Plattner's baggage. And Troy Jackson, he's a former Maine State Senate president. He's a logger. He's someone who can try and paint himself as both a guy with experience, but also kind of an outsider populist at the same time. So if he wins with this populist message, I actually think that could be a model for Democrats statewide to have a message that's about the billionaires versus the rest of us, but not scaring people away with that socialist brand.
I'm curious, he's a former ex-Republican, for those who are unaware. Do you think that hurts or helps him? Because that's quite a swing to go from the Republican Party to a Democratic progressive.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not a fan of these huge swings because it raises questions about their principles, their foundation of why they're running. Is it just for power, or is it about some core ideas that they believe in? At the same time, I think when you look at the electorate, generally people just want to win. This is a must-win state for Mainers, and I think Democrats and even some of those swing independents probably aren't going to pay as much attention to that background. You've seen similar examples. For example, Charlie Kristen, Florida, and others,
Yeah.
where I think people are focused on the now and not as much of their background. I wish people honestly would care a little bit more about that.
We'll see. I mean, we'll determine that in November. Let's talk about another race that you mentioned a moment ago, the Senate race in Michigan, because that is gearing up to be a highly contested one. You know, it starts with the Democratic primary. You've got, as you mentioned, another progressive candidate, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. He is going to be taking on the moderate Congresswoman Haley Stevens. One of these two are going to oppose Mike Rogers, the Republican there, who's expected to receive support, of course, from President Trump during his visit to the state tomorrow, and then certainly support all through the actual election in November. If you're Mike Rogers, who would you rather face in November?
It's hard to say. Honestly, this is an interesting turning point in the race because the conventional wisdom would say he wants to face Abdul Al-Sayed. He's a democratic socialist. He's too far extreme. After the COVID and George Floyd era politics, he's said some things that are too extreme, abolishing prisons or defund the police that are too extreme for voters today. But the thing that's happening right now is we're seeing that Abdul Al-Sayed is an extremely talented candidate, kind of the mold of Zoran Mamdani. He's building a really interesting coalition and an incredible amount of energy in his campaign. At the same time, Haley Stevens is having her own moment right now. She had this comment, stick it to him, in her sort of Michigan accent, and initially people were panning that as weird. Now suddenly people are loving it after a TMZ appearance that she had a few days ago. So honestly, if you're Mike Rogers, I'd focus on his own campaign, because on the Democratic side, I could see strengths to either of them.
Yeah, it's certainly not going to be an easy race for anyone who ends up being involved in it. Let me ask you this, because earlier I was speaking to an economist about the state of the economy, given that when we look at these races, I think most consequential for Americans is affordability. That's probably the top issue, or one of the top issues they're concerned about. There's a recent survey by the Pew Research Center that came out this month, and it found that 6 in 10 Americans say that the economy under President Trump's policy, that they believe it's worsened the economic conditions here in the U.S. And this is a figure that has only grown since last September. How do Republicans turn this around, show Americans that they can lower prices amid the affordability concerns that people are having?
Well, the prices don't lie, and that's what's driving those voter sentiments. And at this point, between now and the election, 100 days, I actually don't think Republicans can do anything to really turn that around. The polling is really built in. And frankly, MAGA and Republicans are underwater on the economy. However, the only little glimmer of light, maybe if you are Republican, is the fact that Democrats haven't effectively made their case nationally. They have in some localized areas, but not nationally. And when you look at the polling, not only are Republicans and MAGA underwater by 15 to 20, 25% points, depending on the poll you look at, but Democrats as a brand are also underwater by 15 to 20%. And what that tells you, I think, is that voters are frustrated with both parties. That's why this exhausted majority is growing, people looking for a new way in politics right now. And I think ultimately both parties need to reinvent themselves to be more responsive to the people, or we'll continue to see weirder outcomes.
Yeah, and they've only got 100 days to do it before voters actually head to the polls and make their decisions. Political analyst Stephen Olikara, always enjoy your conversation and your perspective again with this small window of time between now and November. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. And here at NewsNation, we're looking